First of all, this is an uncertain time. It's 2017. You wrote an opinion piece which lays out your view of the world, the risks, the opportunities. You said that Europe is at risk of breaking apart, but you would like to rectify that.
Well, yes. I basically summed up my views very concisely, but I did overstate slightly the danger facing the European Union, namely that it's facing disintegration. And that was a slight exaggeration because neither Putin nor China want the Europe to disintegrate. Each have their own reasons. China needs Europe as a market. Putin needs Europe to provide the capacity to produce something, because the Putin regime is only capable of exploiting natural resources. They can't produce, and they need Europe to provide that capacity. So that's therefore, Europe is not going to disintegrate, but coming under the dominance of Putin's Russia would be a destruction, undermining all the values that Europe stands for. So it's really not much better coming under the dominance of Putin's Russia than to disintegrate.
You also have said that open society needs defending. Why is it such under attack?
Because basically it is threatened by a different model. I distinguish between two as a broad generalization, but basically there are two forms of government. One where the leaders are elected in a democratic process, and they are supposed to serve the interests of the people who elected them. Obviously, I say supposed because there's an element of hypocrisy there, but it's much preferable to the other model, where the rulers are manipulating the people to serve their purposes. That's the other model. And currently, unfortunately, that other model is on the rise. It's spreading, both in of course, Russia, China, possibly, and many other countries, including my own. So I hope that we can get people who believe in an open society gather together and defend the principles of open society.
I think we're almost 24 hours away from the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States. Where does he stand in an open society?
Well, I have described him as an impostor and con man and a would-be dictator. But he's only a would-be dictator because I'm confident that the Constitution and the institutions of America, of the United States, are strong enough. The division of power is in operation, and he would be dictator if he could get away with it, but he won't be able to.
Because he will be stopped at what point? If he goes too far?
That's right.
In foreign policy or domestic policy?
In both areas. Obviously, in foreign policy, he has greater powers than in domestic policy. But I think Congress will be a bulwark protecting its rights. And when Trump oversteps the mark, they will fight back. And if they have a bipartisan coalition, they will actually succeed in limiting him.
The markets for the moment seem to be behind Donald Trump. It lost you a lot of money. What are they seeing?
Well, they are facing really a unique victory because they are in control of the presidency, of effectively Congress, and well, it's not official, of the Supreme Court as well.
So this is the Republicans, but what about the markets? The markets,
well,
the stock markets?
Well, because the markets see Trump dismantling regulations and reducing taxes. And that has been their dream. So their dream has come true.
What does it mean for the U.S. economy?
Well, that's a very open question because right now the uncertainty is at a peak because it's impossible to predict exactly how Trump is going to act because he hasn't actually thought it through. He didn't expect to win. He was surprised. You know, he was engaged in building his brand and improving it by his success in attracting crowds. And it's really only when he got elected that he started seriously to think about what he's going to do. I personally am convinced that he's going to fail, not because of people like me who would like him to fail, but because the ideas that guide him are inherently self-contradictory, and the contradictions are actually already embodied by his advisors. He's got 3 chiefs of staff instead of 1, and in his cabinet, and therefore you will have the various establishments fighting with each other. And that is going to cause a very unpredictable outcome. So right now, uncertainty is at a peak. And actually, uncertainty is the enemy of long-term investment. So I don't think the markets are going to do very well. Right now, they're still celebrating, but when reality comes, it will prevail.
Why do you say you would like him to fail? Is it because he can do a lot of damage if he continues? Or it's ideologically different to you?
No, because he actually stands for that other form of government that is the opposite of an open society. This I called it open society, but it's really better described as dictatorship or a mafia state. That's the threat. But as I say, in America it will not succeed. But at the same time, America is going to be engaged in an internal political fight, and its beneficial influence in the world in defending open societies, imperfect as it was, will be absent. And that is will have very far-reaching negative effects in Europe, in other parts of the world.
Will he unify or divide America further?
Obviously, he will divide, because he considers that he embodies the will of the people, and therefore anybody who disagrees with him is not really part of the people.
How should CEOs and businessmen deal with President Trump?
Well, that's their business. I'm not. I will keep as far away from it as I can.
You have been critical about Russia in the past. Are you concerned that this rapprochement between President Trump and Vladimir Putin puts Europe at risk?
Definitely. It also has put America at risk, because Putin has exercised a nefarious influence on Trump. He's gone out of his way to help his campaign, and particularly to disrupt Hillary Clinton's campaign. And he was successful beyond his expectations, because even Putin didn't think that he would actually succeed. But he developed certain techniques of guiding and influencing public opinion that turned out to be more successful than he expected.
What can Europe do in this new world order at a time where Europe is very fragile?
Yeah. Well, Europe is European Union is in a process of disintegration. Brexit last year was a disaster with Brexit and other elections, the Italian election, and so on. Europe is, as I say, in the process of this disintegration, and it needs to be reversed. It's not going to be easy. A lot of things have to go right. But we must make an effort to preserve the European Union in order to thoroughly reinvent it. Because the fact is that the EU has become dysfunctional because it is governed by laws which are not appropriate to the current circumstances. They were defined in the Maastricht Treaty, and different conditions, those conditions that prevailed then no longer prevail, particularly after the financial crisis of 2008. But the treaties can't be changed because the treaty change has to be approved by referenda, and the last referenda were defeated in France and the Netherlands, and therefore the treaty change has become impossible. And therefore you have to find ways, roundabout ways, to change the laws, find some loophole, and it takes a lot of effort to do that. And we are now in the hands of the lawyers who find these loopholes, and that makes the functioning of the EU increasingly cumbersome, and as a result, action is very slow and very inadequate. So this can't continue like this. One has to recognize that the European Union has become too complicated, and people are alienated, and the anti-European parties and movements are gathering force, and things look very bleak.
But how do you reconnect with that voter? Does it have to be politicians in countries such as France, or does it have to come from Brussels?
Well, I think actually it has to come from the people and the political elite has to recognize that they have failed to fulfill the legitimate expectations of the electorate. And they are responsible for the breakdown of the European Union, and they have to change the direction, and the electorate has to make its voice heard. Unfortunately, due to this alienation, they are more likely to, or they're supporting the anti-European parties, and that's what makes the political situation even more difficult.
Is there a link, or is this wave of populism rooted in the financial crisis? We forget about that, but we did go through a huge financial crisis. Is there a link?
Well, if Europe breaks down, the consequences will be very dire, and as I say, it's currently going in the wrong direction. But I do see a way it could be saved, and I think it has to also come. This is also recognized by many of the people in Brussels. They can't say so publicly, but they know that Europe is not functioning.
How do you see Brexit playing out?
It's going to be a long process, and I hope that both sides will realize that they have to find some common ground, that a bitter divorce would hurt both sides, both the UK and the EU. But the divorce will be a very long process. And as I think that people realize that they are going in the wrong direction, they will want to come together. And I think it is already happening. For instance, Barnier, who's a tough negotiator, has told the members of the European Parliament that a divorce would hurt not only the UK but also the European Union. And I think hopefully the same thing will happen. And in my opinion, it's unlikely that Prime Minister May is actually going to remain in power. He's got a very divided cabinet, a very small majority in Parliament, and as I say, I think she will not last.
But she cannot go against the referendum. She cannot go against the will of the people of the UK.
Yeah, at the moment, the people in the UK are in denial. The current economic situation is not as bad as it was predicted, and they live in hope. But as the currency depreciates and inflation will be the driving force that will lead to the declining living standards, this is going to take some time. But when it does happen, they'll realize that they are earning less than before, because wages won't rise as fast as the cost of living.
But then what happens? A new referendum? Fresh elections?
Well, I think the divorce is going to take a very long time. It's much harder to divorce than to get married, and so I think the desire for rapprochement will develop, and in theory, or maybe even in practice, you could have a situation in 2019 or 2020 when Britain would leave the EU, because it does have to take place. But they could leave on a Friday evening and join over the weekend and have the new arrangement in place on Monday morning.
What kind of is it a coincidence, actually, and I'll come back to their question, is it a coincidence that a Chinese president is here in Davos 4 days before the US inauguration?
Yes, I think it's a first, and I think Trump will do more to make China acceptable as a leading member of the international community than the Chinese could do by themselves. So he'll be greatly helped by Trump.
So do you see a trade war between the US and China this year?
Well, definitely. Trump is gearing up for a trade war. But that's what is irreconcilable with economic prosperity. You can't have a trade war and a well-functioning international system. So that's where I think actually it is in everybody's interest to see China succeed in changing its economic growth model and to become embedded in an international system and become acceptable as a potential leader. And I think this is now also very much recognized by Europe, because Europe is being attacked by Trump economically, and China is attacked by Trump. So there is a common interest for Europe getting closer, finding common ground with Asia. And I've met several of the people from Brussels who spoke about that. It's a lively, under lively consideration, But I think there's a slight mistake in, actually not so slight, in seeking an accommodation with China, because the Asian countries are in the process of forming I tell you the name, I always forget it, it's RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. They are forming that right now. It was initiated by China. All the members, it has got 10 Asian countries who are members. And I think there is a very good chance that a lot of the other members who were members of TTIP, which they were very attached to, and they hope that it will revive. That's an idle hope. But if they combine and actively participate in forming this RCEP, then you would have a regional cooperation which is not dominated by China, because the other countries taken together form a counterweight to China, and that would be a very healthy development. And it's really it's this RCEP rather than China itself that ought to be the partner of the European Union, which is also an association of states. So the right partner for one association is with another association and not with one particular country in that association. I mentioned that to the people I talked to, and I hope I'm happy to say this in public, because I think this would be a great improvement, and I think it would be a very positive development.
If Donald Trump antagonizes or even labels China a currency manipulator, will China retaliate?
Yes. Xi Jinping can't afford not to, because he's also involved in a very serious political fight that is behind the closed doors. It's except for a few articles that come out from time to time showing that it's a very strong fight. I think the future of China is right now at a kind of a decision point. Whether China becomes a more open society or a more closed society will be determined in the next 2 years, because Xi Jinping actually wants to move it towards a closed society. He's has more in common with Putin's Russia than with the open society of the European Union. So I hope that China will develop in the direction of open society, because people in very responsible positions are very much wedded to the idea of an open society. They appreciate an open society more than the people of America, because they take it for granted. They've been living in it for 200 years. But in China, they come from a much more dictatorial background, and they really are working for an open society.
One last question on the Chinese economy. How would you stabilize their trilemma? So they have outflows, the renminbi is dropping, and of course they also have dwindling reserves. How do you stabilize the three?
Well, this is, it's not resolved because China has not actually succeeded yet in changing its growth model. But that, and probably won't do it in the next 2 years because Xi Jinping wants to maintain an unsustainable rate of growth. And by is doing that by rekindling the furnaces and producing more goods that are already in supply. But he's in a position to do that for the next 2 years. So I think this is it's currently happening, and actually the Silk Road and building roads and railroads in the rest of Asia actually is a good way to put the surplus production to good use. The alternative is to use it for armaments, and that's what is currently in the balance, because either China will become more repressive and at home and more aggressive abroad. That's one way to go, and the other one is the success in changing the economic growth model.
One last question from me, and then we're going to take your questions from the floor. On Hungary, Hungary plans to crack down on all of your funded NGOs.
Yeah, well, that is a very serious threat, and I want to choose my words very carefully because the fate of our grantees and our staff is at stake. So I actually wrote a statement which I want to read. The threats being made by members of the Hungarian government against Hungarian civil society are an affront to the values of the European Union and to the commitment to the rule of law on which it has been built over decades. Civil society is a vital component of democracy, and so is open debate about public policy. I have dedicated my foundations and my life to promoting open society. The current Hungarian government stands for the exact opposite. Hungary greatly benefits from its membership of the EU. In that light, the current government's attempt to intimidate and discredit civil society is totally unacceptable.
I will now take questions from the floor. So if you have a couple of questions, also there is the email address actually that you need to send them in. So one question that has come in is on Ukraine. How would you describe the current political situation in Ukraine and the status of the reforms?
I'm very involved in Ukraine, and I can testify that the current government has already achieved more than any previous government since Maidan in introducing essential reforms. That's not currently generally recognized because corruption is endemic. It's built into the system, and there are strong forces operating against it. But the Prime Minister, and I would distinguish him from the President, Prime Minister Groisman, who came to power just a short while ago, has already done more than any of the previous governments by going to market price on gas, and that makes it profitable to develop the Ukrainian shale gas deposits, and already Naftogaz, which is one of the major forces for reform, is producing profits. It's the largest taxpayer in Ukraine today, while a year ago it was a black hole in the budget. And but these reforms will take time. It will take one more year really to pay off, and that 1 year is very troublesome because Ukraine is not getting enough support from its allies abroad. I'm glad to say that the U.S. will continue to support Ukraine in spite of Trump, because there is a bipartisan majority in Congress, and they will actually probably increase their support. But the European Union is very short of funds and hasn't done enough. And that's a big problem because actually Ukraine is the greatest asset that the EU has to defend it against Russian aggression.
I have a question on Donald Trump. You talk about Congress and the Constitution limiting the power of the president, but that is predicated on Trump respecting those institutions. What if he does not respect those institutions, like in Poland?
Well, I think that the institutions themselves have the ability to enforce themselves with the support of the Constitution. So I don't think Trump can ignore them. He does have much more control over foreign policy than domestic policy. But in domestic policy, clearly, Congress has the upper hand.
I have a question on Japan. You recently met with the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. What do you expect with the government of Japan and its fiscal policy?
I was actually very impressed with Abe. I was suspicious because of his sort of family history and his nationalism. My friends who were supporting Trump were telling me that he's a changed man. I didn't quite believe it until I actually had a very constructive discussion, both on economic policy, which he actually understands a great deal better than I expected him to. And we went there. I went with Adair Turner, the chairman of INET, and we had a concrete plan for dealing with the economic problem, and he asked us to send it to him, and he'll give it to his experts, and I think it will actually be adopted. It's a plan to combine monetary and fiscal stimulus in a way that doesn't add to the already enormous amount of debt, because the purchases by the central bank are matched with the stimulus. So I think there is a solution which actually will be paving the road to possible reform also in the EU. And on the geopolitical front, he could become the leader of this counterweight to China, and participate with China in CREP, which I think is the right way forward.
I have a question which says you made an extraordinary pledge last September to invest $500 million in businesses that help migrants. What are you hoping to achieve by blending your investments with your philanthropy?
Is to mobilize the innovative capacity of the private sector to contribute to the basically the solving the facilitating communications and financial transactions that would alleviate that position.
Mr. Soros, one last question. Do you see a significant probability of an impactful increase in geopolitical and military conflict, so insecurity, because of some combination of the US, Russia, and China?
I didn't quite get it.
Some kind of conflict. Are you worried about the world's security now more than in 2016?
I am, because if you start a trade war, that can easily deteriorate in other conflicts. So I think we are in very dangerous ground.
Mr. Soros, thank you so much for this time.
Okay.